Are you a man and you have ever been accused of not being real? Or have you even wondered what being a real man means? Well, I have my doubts. I don't know which of the two, but what I do know is that this video is very important for you. There are 3 checks that you need in your life if you want to be a real man. You need to ensure that you check these 3 boxes. If you want to live a life worthy of note, you want to be acknowledged as a good man, and you want to have impact to your world, you cannot joke with these 3 things. Vulnerability is not you just sharing your secret. Anybody can share secret. As a matter of fact, I believe strongly that vulnerability is equal to humility. Vulnerability is humility. It will be very hard to be vulnerable if you're a proud fellow.
This is Men's Stable Podcast.
It is Olumayo Kunye and you're welcome back to the Men's Stable Podcast. It feels so great to be doing this once again, and I want to appreciate you. If this is the first time you're coming around our videos or seeing this channel, I want to ask you to please stay around to the end of this video. Men's Stable Podcast is a platform where we talk about character issues, every matter that borders around the male figure, namely our faith, our commitment to Jesus, our visions, and everything we need to do to pattern our lives according to the model of Christ. Men's Stable Podcast essentially is a platform where we talk about our character in relation to the expectations of God. So I want to ask that you please hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that yet, and stay around because so much more is coming. All right, so let's dive into today's conversation. I can't but help admit that today's conversation is majorly my belief and perhaps what I've also come to find in God, some of the lessons that I've come to learn over the years. Again, looking and studying the person Jesus. And I believe that there are 3 major things that applies to us, actually applies to everyone who desires to be real, who desires to be a real man, because I strongly believe that there is no other perfect model like Jesus. So for me, Jesus didn't only live as a spiritual model or a spiritual foundation for us. He also lived as a human model for us. It was all the realness that we can ever imagine. And I found some things very inspiring in his story, which I would like to share with you today. So let's go. There are 3 checks that you need in your life if you want to be a real man. You need to ensure that you check these 3 boxes. If you want to live a life worthy of note, you want to be acknowledged as a good man, and you want to have impact to your world, you cannot joke with these 3 things, and they are deeply rooted also in the scripture. So I'm saying that so that we can also go to check and cross-check as well, because this podcast is not where we just speak over people. What I simply do here is to advertise Christ. So you go from here and you go and check, you go and look at your life against the model of Christ and ensure that you do not fight it when it's convicting you. So to the 3 things. Number 1, compassion. Compassion. We live in a day where we have been taught to be self-aware, where we are so self-conscious. Things and conversations around self-love, self-happiness is on the rise. Even though those things are not bad in itself, right? But they put us in a certain mode where we don't remember that there is more to this life. There is more to our life than us. Compassion is an intentional act where you are not self-centered. You can't be compassionate if you are self-centered. And at the same time, compassion is an important ingredient of a Christian. You cannot be a good Christian and not be compassionate. Emphasis on a good Christian. If you will be a Christian the right way, you must be compassionate. Shout out to my friend Sam Fafiolu. He said something which I would like to pin here. He said that the people who were first called Antiochs were disciples, right? So they were disciples first off, and they were tagged Christians. Why? Because of their lifestyle. It means that just anybody who claims, to be affiliated to Christ can't be tagged as Christians. Who are the actual people that are tagged Christians? They are the disciples. And it reminds me of my last video where I talked about being a disciple. So if you haven't watched that, it's somewhere around this video, and you can go to that to watch. Now, to my point here, if compassion has not been one of your characters or qualities as a Christian, it means you need to check your life. It means you need to check your Christian growth. You need to check your relationship. Compassion. Oftentimes the Bible will talk about Jesus, and it will say that he was moved with compassion. And we saw these examples almost everywhere. In healing the sick, raising the dead. The Bible said he went from city to city. He did good. And that word means philanthropy. So Jesus indeed was a good man. He did good. He was moved with compassion. Once and again, he would address the people in a way that it will be clear that he cared about these people. Let us get food for these people to eat, lest they faint. So Jesus was compassionate, and we found out that even though he was the Son of God, the bedrock of all of the miracles he did was because of compassion. It means that at whatever point we are in our Christian life, whether anointed, whether not, whether powerful or not, we are actually powerful anyway. But some people have trained to use theirs. They have used theirs more than other, right? So no matter how anointed you are, you will only have impact to the degree to which you are compassionate. Listen, you will only have impact to your word to the degree to which you are compassionate. It means if you are not a compassionate man, nor a compassionate Christian, you are not really touching your generation. You are not really impacting your world. You can be everywhere. You can know how to do, many stuff, right? Be gifted and all of those things. But if you lack compassion, Paul will also say that the greatest gift is charity. If you lack compassion, it means you will lose touch with the people God has sent you to. Compassion is a vital ingredient of our Christian walk. And if you must be a good man, if you must be a real man, just like Jesus, compassion has to be one of your key ingredients. Number 2, integrity. We live in a world and society where there are little emphasis on values, on integrity. It is now as though anyone can do what he deems fit or what he perceives as right, without realizing that there is a model, there is a template for us. There is like a code which we must live by, especially if you now say that you're a Christian. Jesus exemplified integrity to us in many occasions. As a matter of fact, the popular quote, "Let your yea be yea and let your nay be nay," came from him. Jesus displayed integrity before his disciples, displayed integrity before the Pharisees, before the scribes, before Pontius Pilate, and a lot of examples we cannot count enough. It means that it is not just enough to be spiritual, not enough to be tongue-talking. You must be a person of integrity. The simple definition of having integrity is respecting your words. Have respect on your words. We are not saying you are God. We are not saying you should be equal to God. But think about it. Are we not the God kind? If God says that what I say I would do you think he expects less from you? He expects that whatever you say is what you will do. He expects that when you promise or when you commit yourself to something, you will deliver on it. He also wants you to be faithful. As much as He is faithful, He wants to be able to say, you are also faithful. You know, the Bible said, to him that is faithful in little shall be faithful to much. And I always say that God doesn't wait for you to have more, in your books before He determines that you are faithful. In that little estate, in that little space where you have been found faithful, He already concludes, He closes the conversation and He says, you are faithful. So, if you must be a good man, if you must live your life according to the perfect man, if you must live a real man on earth, it means you must be a man of integrity. People have to be able to hold you by your words. They have to be able to trust you. And it is to this end that more is committed to us. And number 3, vulnerability. Vulnerability. You see, this conversation has been, will I say, trendy in the light of the situation we have as a country. Even in the world at large, there's been a lot of meltdowns, of emotions, a lot of mental health issues has popped up, and all of this has sprung up conversations around vulnerability. And this has led to many definitions and many misconceptions about vulnerability. I would like to say, one of the ways of defining a thing is to say what it is not. Definition is not just saying what it is, it is also saying what it is not. So one of the things that vulnerability is not is that vulnerability is not you sharing secrets about. Now, don't make a mistake. I'm not saying you will not be open eventually about your secret in vulnerability. But vulnerability is not you just sharing your secret. Anybody can share secret. As a matter of fact, I believe strongly that vulnerability is equal to humility. Vulnerability is humility. It will be very hard to be vulnerable if you are a proud fellow. As a matter of fact, it comes very natural to be proud. It comes natural to be egocentric. And this explains why we have a lot of struggles around vulnerability, because it is easier to be less vulnerable, because that helps us stay in a class where we are not exposed. But that sounds pretty much like pride. Now, humility is not beans. It is not easy to be humble. Let's tell ourselves the truth. It's not so easy to be humble. As a matter of fact, you need to be intentional if you must be humble. Now, this is what makes you vulnerable as a person. And we see the evidences in the life of Jesus. How many times He was vulnerable before people. How often He would do things that you would consider degrading. But this was Jesus. Jesus as a man, He lived a vulnerable life. He washed the feet of His disciples. He was seen crying. Jesus was seen weeping at the tomb of Lazarus. He was seen praying that the cup should pass over Him, just to show his humanity. He was seen being weak, being feeble. He was seen dying. We saw all manner of vulnerability postures from Jesus. I'm not just saying, piety. I'm talking about real vulnerability. We saw all of this in the life of Jesus. It means that something is not right as a Christian if you are not vulnerable. You are not living like Christ. Something is wrong somewhere if you are not a humble person. Yes, if you are not humble. I said that it comes very natural to be proud. And you may need to go back and check, in which way have I not been intentionally humble? Because that may be the reason why you still have struggles with vulnerability. That may be the reason why you cannot open up. That may be the reason why you are not unashamed about your nakedness. You need to go back and see, which way do I need to be more humble. I believe that this has been very helpful for you, and I'm so glad to be sharing this with you. But permit me to say, if you will be seen as a real man by your spouse, by your family, by your friends, by people in your circle, it means you have to be a man that observes at least these 3 qualities. Now, these lists are not exclusive. I'm not saying this is all the list there is. No, this list may be extensive. However, these are the ones I've seen vividly in the life of Jesus, that if we will sincerely adopt to our life, we will live a complete and a good life. And you see, what is more humbling is that these qualities are 99% aimed on our humanity. It means that it is possible to be a lover of God, be tongue talking, love to go to church, love to serve God, and lack all of these 3 qualities. You will continue, you will do business as usual, but you will have little or no impact on your world, little or no impact on the people God is sending you to. You will not be able to represent Christ to your world. And these are the things that I find very common, especially with people who lack touch of these 3 qualities. One is that you find that they are unkind. They disintegrate very easily. They can't keep a circle. They can't keep fellowship with people. You find that most of the time they misrepresent Christ, either at work, or wherever they find themselves. People are like, is this how Christianity is? And often you find falsehood on the increase with this kind of people. Falsehood, they are faking a lot of things. And lastly, these people become less impactful. And why are we Christians if not to touch our world and our generation? I strongly believe that you've been blessed by this video. I'd like you to drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what part of this discussion stood out for you. What have you learned from this conversation? Which of these 3 qualities are you improving on? Let me know. Tell me in the comment section. And lastly, if you haven't seen our newly released song Mansion, please head over to YouTube and watch the video, or you go stream on all digital platforms. As you can see in my shirt, I am a mansion. Thank you very much for joining me on this conversation. I look forward to seeing all of your comments. See you on the next one. Bye. I'm a mansion.